Alrighty now. Make sure my hair's together. Okay. Here's another one. Um, I didn't finish telling you that story about the dark day and God giving us this beautiful home. But let me tell you this. I had a friend at the time who is still my friend now. We're like sisters. She and I worked together at the hair salon. And during this period of the new day having begun and me having no clue because it was too dark and I was too through. No, I wasn't trying to rhyme. But anyway, so here we were sitting in the salon. And this particular day, I was so down. I couldn't even fake the smile. I was up to there with all the frustration of the foreclosure, trying to save the house and worrying about my husband who was blind and in a wheelchair, worrying about him having to find a place for him to sleep, and me maybe having to sleep with a relative or up in the salon. And I didn't know what was going to happen, but you know how your mind goes all the way there when you're in panic mode. And I remembered I sat in my car. My friend didn't know this. She was not aware of this. Just I'm sharing this with people who seem to have their backs up against the wall. Because when people go through stuff and they realize that God will rescue them and they will not leave them in the devil's hands, trust me, when God brings you up, baby, he puts you in a large place. He puts your feet on solid ground, and you don't even have the stench of the smoke from the fire left on you because you are blessed. When it's all said and done, when God says it is finished, the battle is over, he ain't lying. It's over. Now listen to this. I was sitting in my car, and she knew nothing about this. I was sitting in my car while my baby was watching the Lakers. And I was pouring my heart out to God. I was letting every request be made known. I was fussing. I was crying. I was complaining. I was boo-hooing. I was pity partying. I was doing everything in the world I could do that night. I was getting it all out. And which is what we should do with God. And let me tell you, I got my tape and played it. And the name of the song it was a Disney song, A Whole New World. You've heard it, A Whole New World. Well, anyway, I played that. And every time I played, I had a big old thing of, tissue. I played that thing and I played that thing. I was just crying and playing and crying and listening. And Lord, that's my prayer. That's my prayer. Where's my whole new world? Where is my whole new world? When do I get to enjoy the abundant life? What happened to that? We're living right with, oh man, I was going on and on ad infinitum. Anyway, so when I got through getting it all off my chest for probably the full duration of the Laker game, oh, it's funny now, but it sure was not funny then. Um, what happened was, I would say maybe a matter of within that same month, I'm still going through changes, running back and forth, faxing this, faxing that to the bank, filling out this documentation, and oh, that was one of the darkest times in my life, I'm telling you. I sat there and I went to the salon one day, and listen to this. I went to the salon and I just couldn't put on that happy face. And my friend Thelma saw this. And she said, this story is in my book, by the way. She said, Pat, you seem to be so down. And then she said, are you really worried about losing that house? And I said, yeah. I said, I don't know what I'm going to do with Milton. He's got to have somebody taking care of him, but I don't want him in a convalescent home. I want him with me. But where can we go? We don't even have the money to rent a room, let alone trying to keep the house we already got. So she begins to speak very slowly and quite deliberately, very somber in tone. And she's approaching the subject quite carefully, very tentatively. She's being very sensitive because she knows I'm right on the edge. And she asked me this question. She says, Pat, I got to ask you this, but take it in the right spirit, okay? Did it ever occur to you that maybe, just maybe now, God didn't really want you to keep that house? You know, it never had occurred to me. That was actually something to think about. It never occurred to me. And I said, no, the obvious answer. And she said, okay. She said, you know, Pat, God could have a whole new world out there for you. My ears went boing. She said, God could have a whole new world out there for you, but you're trying so hard to hang on to this house. And God may have something so much better for you if you were just willing to look away from that and see what else He might have. And maybe you need to open your mind. And I was like, if this woman knew what she said to me, I told her at that moment, I stared at her for a minute. And I said, I didn't tell you about my prayer to God, did I? I mean, that's just how freaky it was. And she said, what prayer? I said, when I was in the car playing that tape, A Whole New World. And she said, no, Pat. I said, girl, we looked at each other. I said, you quoted the whole theme, the central theme of my prayer. I kept saying, Lord, where is my whole new world? With new horizons to pursue. I mean, I was going through the lyrics and everything. And she and I looked at each other and we were so moved because she realized God had used her in that moment. And I knew God used her. And that's what opened my mind up to moving, even looking at another city an hour away. Well, as it turned out, I started looking. And everything we put bids in on was snatched right out from under us. And that's when the Lord started showing me scriptures saying, the Lord shall choose your inheritance for you. He reiterated what he had shown me a few years before. So I said, well, Lord, pick on because you know my taste. And I know whatever you give will be a good thing. So what happened? We landed this house. And I already said how that happened. But what I wanted to share with you was God knew how distraught I was. And he gave me a word from a friend that had no idea he was using her to let me know, baby, I've heard your prayer and I'm on it. And you know, when God says things like, I got this, he's got it. And boy, he'll do it better than we could ever have even planned on doing it. God had us. And now he's got me. Now that he's got my husband up in heaven with him, he's got me now. And he told me after my husband went on to be with him, he said, I'm taking care of you now. And because God has a heart for widows and orphans, I know he's going to take good care of me. And the testimonies will continue to come because I will brag on the best father I could have ever had, my heavenly Father, who loves me with a never-ending love. I love you, Lord.